You could say she's like a prairie fire. You could say she's like a... Oh, you could say she's like a prairie fire. A soaring spirit riding on the flames of her desire. If you feel her burning in your soul tonight, prairie fire is the name you'll know her by. Look how you light the midnight sky. Prairie fire, tell us why.
Welcome to Prairie Fire. I'm Sarah Edwards. You know, here in the Midwest, we tend to think that we have to go to Chicago or New York to see the best in painting and sculpture. But it turns out Central Illinois is home to one of the country's most celebrated artists. Meet Preston Jackson.
If you look closely at my work, you can't see all of it, but if you really think about it, you'll see something musical. I grew up in Decatur, Illinois, a wonderful city, a thriving city at that time. My father was a minister, and my mom, mother of 10 children. I didn't realize that we were what you would think of as poor because we never felt that way. My family, they were providers, just like all the families on Sunset Avenue. Anyway, very large family, very close-knit family. I owe that to my becoming an artist, you know, finding my niche. I wanted to be seen, especially under the eyes of my older brother. I think I became an artist at the age of 7. In middle school, I began to get a little mischievous about drawing. Later, I applied to Southern Illinois in Carbondale. And you know, like when doors explode open, that's what it was like culturally, because I had never seen that many people who looked like me, spoke like me, played music. I mean, it was a total awakening. I raised alligators when I was small, but I could never keep a roommate when I was in college because they'd all split. The smell of alligators, and late at night you can hear them jumping in the bathtub. But anyway, I did a lot of things because I was curious. Things like foundry, casting in bronze, covered it. Jewelry making, covered it. Painting, I covered it. So that was just an itch that needed to be scratched. Kind of overdid it, you know. But heck, it was the 60s, and I felt free. I felt very good about life, you know. And we moved on to Chicago, believe it or not. I left Macomb and accepted a job in Chicago as a sculpture teacher. And I stayed there 32 years.
Just because my hair is curly.
Everything we know culturally and connected to entertainment and sports and all that kind of stuff came from Chicago. Harlem Renaissance in Chicago was larger than the Harlem Renaissance in New York. The impact of that period caused so much cultural richness, and that's why I built Bronzeville to Harlem.
Shady makes no difference, lady. That's why they call me Shiny.
Within Bronzeville to Harlem, There are a lot of personal things. That's what makes it alive, because these people are real. There is a small figure of my father holding two twins in his arms, coming from St. Mary's Hospital, where my twin sister and I was born. Scale is important. When the art becomes larger than your body, there's a certain kind of respect that happens between you and the work. Large monumental sculptures that we see in the cities, larger cities, that was done on purpose. For a small-scale sculpture that I did, on Bronzeville to Harlem, I can reach in there and grab it and pick it up. The proportions are a little strange, not so correct, but you don't care. I do what you call fine art, or social conscious art, because you can bend the rules, And haven't I been doing that all my life? Music was a part of me that evolved along with the art. I put a band together called the Rhythm Aces in Decatur. We made records, we recorded in Nashville. Some of the most famous musicians on the planet was on that Chitlin circuit. We would drive a little Volkswagen bus. We couldn't go downtown and stay in hotels because most places, even if we're in the north, we're still segregated. Fortunately, we didn't feel the segregation. We were having too much fun. Unfortunately, we should have known that was an opportunity to fight against segregation. I've been known to be an activist. I've been known to be somewhat militant also. But like I say, things evolve, and I learned that bad feelings can hurt you. But bad feelings can also change things to create good feelings. You see, I pride myself from not being afraid of nothing. That's in my work, and I can't hide it. All of this stuff speaks another language, and not a language that's aggressive, but a language that puts you in front and say, don't back up. So I want my art to always remind people that there's positive consciousness out there. I hope that my life has touched many young kids out there. And teaching this length of time, 50-something years, I better be good, because that's a lot of people that you've impressed. That's a lot of people that remember your personality. And I just hope they become good people. I can draw and paint anything I like, and I marvel at the power that creates. I marvel at the fact that it does make a difference and it changes. And if you believe in yourself enough, you'll stay on that.
If you go to our website, you can find a Google Earth map showing where all of Preston Jackson's sculptures are located throughout the United States. If you ever find yourself on the University of Illinois campus, you must go visit the cherry blossom trees at the Japan House. The blossoms don't always bloom every year, but the history of the trees and the man who brought them here are both pretty fascinating.
In Japanese culture, the philosophy of the cherry blossom, or sakura, is as deeply rooted as these beautiful trees. Each spring, people flock to the mountains of Japan to watch them bloom. Stateside, you can see these trees putting on quite a show in Washington, D.C. But you may not know you can find the blooming cherry blossom right here in central Illinois. For almost 60 years, the Japan House has been preserving and teaching Japanese culture at the University of Illinois. Its current building was completed in 1998 and is situated inside an arboretum. Kimiko Gunji, Professor Emeritus of Japanese Arts and Culture and the former director of the Japan House, says the trees represent our lives, fleeting, much like the cherry blossom.
It's just like Buddhist concept of impermanence of all things. Things never stays, so everything goes away, comes and goes. So when it's here, you should enjoy things the most. That's very much fragile nature, fragile yet beautiful. So people think even your life might be shorter, so then why not enjoy it?
On the 10th anniversary of the new Japan House, Dr. Genshitsu Sen, a 15th generation tea master, gave the Japan House a very special gift.
He received honorary doctorate degree, and when he came, he walked through the pathway, nothing there. So he kind of said, wouldn't that be nice to have a cherry blossom around this pathway? So I said, yes. But I thought, well, that might be just a talk, right? And then he went home, and soon the International Affairs Office called saying that Dr. Sen would like to send a 50 Yoshino tree, which is one of the very beautiful Japanese cherry blossom tree.
Dr. Sen sent master landscape gardener Katsuo Kubo to design the project and oversee the installation of what would be called Sen Cherry Tree Alley. Each tree was thoughtfully selected by Mr. Kubo and then carefully positioned in keeping with the Japanese cultural belief that, like each human, each tree has a personality uniquely its own. Dr. Sen served in the Japanese Navy in World War II. Post-war, he devoted his life to the philosophy of tea. The UN ambassador has been honored all over the world and just celebrated his 100th birthday in April.
He came to the United States when he was a young man, right after the World War II. And then from there on, his mission is peace through a bowl of tea. You cannot believe he's 100 years old. You all say, well, maybe because he drinks tea every morning, that's why. He went all over the world. And also he donated many house tea rooms. So that's what we have here, 2 tea rooms, donation by him. Based on that, this whole house was built. So it's quite amazing.
Dr. Sen's gifts are a big part of the reason Japan House is still a popular place to visit in central Illinois. The cherry blossom trees he donated 15 years ago are still a main attraction in the gardens of Japan House. Professor Gunji says during cherry blossom season in Japan, the news people tune in for isn't about stocks or the weather. It's all about sakura.
The TV or anything, they say, well, such and such a mountain, it's just about 30% start blooming. Such and such a mountain, maybe 50%. So when they hear like 60%, they drop everything and go to see the beautiful cherry blossom. Because cherry blossom is such a type of the gorgeous flowers, but when it's in a full bloom, tend to start falling down very quickly, very fragile. So people think that, well, the work can wait, but cherry blossom cannot wait.
In spring of 2023, Central Illinois experienced some roller coaster weather that included some very high and very low temperatures. That affected the blooms, and the delicate flowers that usually blanket the trees were small and scarce.
So whatever outside is secondary thing. And some of the things like this, we cannot control. So instead of saying, oh, we don't have cherry blossom, we cannot do anything. No, you shouldn't be you can think about what you can do with what you have.
Blooms or no blooms, there's a lesson to be learned about the simple beauties in life, ones we often overlook. And there's a word for that.
We have a Japanese word called wabi-sabi, beauty. Brilliant beauty, contrast to that is very quiet, rustic beauty. Wabi-sabi beauty is you find in old man who aged very wisely. So then his surface of the skin might be wrinkling, but when you start talking, he had wealth of knowledge, right? So that's the beauty of the wabi-sabi.
You know, every city and small town is full of places where you might pass by and think, oh, that's an interesting looking place on the outside. I wonder what goes on inside. Well, we've found one of those kind of places. It's on a country road right outside Urbana, Illinois. It's called High Cross Sound.
My name is Anthony Gravino. I'm 46 years old, and we're here at my studio, High Cross Sound, in Urbana, Illinois. I was born in Galesburg, Illinois, and I grew up in Monmouth, about 30 miles west of the Mississippi River. And it was a very small town, Midwestern, 80s and 90s. I played sports. That was a big thing in the town, was like the local sports. There's a college there called Monmouth College. But there wasn't a whole lot to do there. So me and my friends just kind of made music our thing. I got a guitar, and two of my friends, one of them had drums and the other one was a bass player. And we started playing in my friend's basement right away. And I played my first gig less than a year after I started playing guitar. That was when I first started listening to the production of music too. And I started to hear the different eras and the different sounds, and I was always fascinated by that. I was always reading the liner notes. I was obsessed. I wanted to do that. I wanted to play music. And then when I got into college, I got into a band that was playing quite a bit. But the band I was in at the time, I knew they weren't going to leave that town, and I knew I couldn't get anywhere other than where we were at that point. I was 23, and I thought, it's time to go do something else. It's time to go pursue my dream.
Do you feel like they've all lost their minds?
I knew a couple people up in Chicago, and they let me crash on their couch for a while I got my feet embedded, and then I just started playing in bands there. It was in about 2005 or 2006 I started, I got a little home recording set up, and I just started, it was just to demo songs and things like that, and I was still playing in bands. And I really loved it. I spent a lot of time on it. And I went on tour with this band in 2008, this band called Oh My God. It was a great band, I loved it. And the tour was great, and it was an amazing experience and fun, but it was also exhausting, and I was just on the road a lot, and I'd started getting business recording, and I just thought, I'm gonna focus more on this now, and I'm gonna try to make this my thing as opposed to being a hired gun guitar player playing in all these different bands. I basically had it was a 3-flat building, and the second floor was my recording studio. But it was cool. It worked, and people liked it. It was laid back, and I had a thing going there for quite a while, and I kind of tired of the city eventually. The thing about moving down here for me was that this place was a big part of it. I had thought in the back of my head, I want to move out of Chicago, but I wasn't totally sure where. And I saw this place on an advertisement on the internet, and I was just like, wow, what a cool place. That could be a really cool recording studio. And I came here, and when I saw the place, it kind of flipped in my head at that point. I just thought, this would work. This kind of checks some boxes. I wasn't actively looking at the time when I decided to move. It was just like the switch flipped and I saw the opportunity and I knew I had to take it. So it's an old horse barn that was built in 1940 and then converted into a house in 1980. It had a lot of things that scared a lot of buyers away from it at first, I think, because it had the cool factor, but then when you kind of look below the surface, it was like, oh, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. So I came in and did a lot of stuff. It was rough. It just needed a little love. Hadn't been loved in a while. So the walls are basically big soft surfaces that aren't reflective. And I love it. It sounds great in here. I mean, from the minute it was finished, I came in and I was like, oh, this is really good. The ceiling is curved, which is great acoustic property. And it's got this old-timey barn lacquered wood on the ceiling, which is just amazing. It just has this grandiose kind of feel. It was one of the things that when I first walked in, I was just like, yeah. Because you want a studio to be inspiring. You need it to be. You need people to come in and feel like I'm somewhere special, or I'm going to do something special. And the visual element of this place has that. I feel like when you walk in, you're kind of walking into a different dimension almost in a weird way. And that was another thing that I was really drawn to when I first saw the place, because when I first walked in, I imagined, okay, this is how it's going to feel for musicians when they first walk in. And that's a really big deal.
Danger will follow me now everywhere I go.
The studio is very much an extension of who I am. I love the fact that I can shape things the way I want them to, that I can have this idea in my head that's very clear how I want it to sound, and that I can use the tools of the studio to make that come off the speakers. I just love that feeling. I couldn't be happier that I moved here. It was a great decision. I haven't regretted it for 1 second that I've been here. I felt very well received by the local music community, and I feel like that in this day and age, doing what I do, it's much less important where you're located. My uncle has this theory that people end up going back to wherever they start at some point in their life. And when I first moved here, I definitely felt that it's I'm out in the country now. I'm much more relaxed. I didn't realize how much stress I was holding because of the city just puts this stress on you all the time. And when I got out here, I really experienced the change of seasons much more profoundly now. Living in Chicago, I was there for 20 years. I didn't realize how much I had lost that connection. And there's really no substitute for that. The scenery around you profoundly affects your life. And when you're an artist, it profoundly affects your art. And I realize more and more since I've been here how important that element is. Mostly I just want to make good records with people and have fun doing it and help people make great sounding recordings, because it's not a lost art, but it's a dying art, and I feel like, I really care about the sound of records. And so for people who want to make a really great sounding record, I want this to be a place that they feel like that's where you go to get the really good sound.
Over the years, a lot of historical figures and authors have really admired the Midwest and its people. For example, in his book Travels with Charlie, In Search of America, John Steinbeck writes, "Almost on crossing the Ohio line, it seemed to me that people were more open and more outgoing. Strangers talked freely to one another without caution. I had forgotten how rich and beautiful is the countryside, the deep topsoil, the wealth of great trees, the lake country. It seemed to me that the earth was generous and outgoing here in the heartland, and perhaps the people took a cue from it." And in The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald writes, "That's my Middle West, not the wheat or the prairies or the lost Swede towns, but the thrilling, returning trains of my youth, and the street lamps and sleigh bells in the frosty dark, and the shadows of holly wreaths thrown by lighted windows on the snow." And then there's Charles Dickens.
American Notes for General Circulation by Charles Dickens. Chapter 13. A Jaunt to the Looking-Glass Prairie and Back. It would be difficult to say why or how, though it was possibly from having heard and read so much about the prairie, but the effect on me was disappointment. looking towards the setting sun. There lay, stretched out before my view, a vast expanse of level ground, unbroken save by one thin line of trees, which scarcely amounted to a scratch upon the great blank. There were bare, black patches on the ground, and the few wild flowers that the eye could see were poor and scanty. Great as the picture was, its very flatness and extent, which left nothing to the imagination, tamed it down and cramped its interest. I felt little of that sense of freedom and exhilaration which a Scottish heath inspires, or even our English downs awaken. It was lonely and wild, but oppressive in its barren monotony. It is not a scene to be forgotten, but it is scarcely one, I think at all events as I saw it, to remember with much pleasure, or to covet the looking on again in afterlife.
You know, I don't think it's all that ugly here in the prairie. Don't you think you're being a little harsh?
I don't think so. You're disturbing my peace.
Well, I mean, look around you. It's pretty beautiful around here. You know, I think you're being a humbug.
Humbug? I'm not a humbug. But what a word. Humbug. Excellent. I shall remember that.
Yeah, you do that.
Yeah, I also had some thoughts on the Mississippi. 2 miles wide of mud. Mud, inglorious mud. Followed by a coach ride to Belleville.
You know, how about we save your thoughts about the Mississippi for another episode?
Yes, I think I could fill up an episode with my thoughts of points south from the bloody Midwest. Excuse me. Humbug. Humbug. Humbug.
If you want to hear Mr. Dickens' thoughts about the Midwest, you can check it out on our website. Just go to will.illinois.edu/prairiefire.
Humbug.
Oh, humbug. Ah, humbug. Bloody humbug. Bar humbug. Bar humbug. Bar humbug. That's what I need for Ebenezer. Perfect for Ebenezer.